Hi, I'm Janet Clark. I'd always had a thing for chemistry. Since I was a kid, I loved mixing stuff in the kitchen and trying to make my own little experiments. It drove my mom nuts, but I was hooked. After high school, I went to university and studied chemical engineering. I landed a job at a pharmaceutical company where I worked on developing new drugs. I really enjoyed it. I felt like I was making a difference by helping to create medicines that could save lives. 2 years ago, I met James at a party thrown by a mutual friend. He was tall, with sandy blonde hair, and a smile that could light up a room. We hit it off right away. "Hey, I'm James," he said, extending his hand. "And you are?" "I'm Janet." "Nice to meet you," I replied, shaking his hand. We talked all night, and before I knew it, we were dating. James was charming, always knew what to say, and made me feel special. After 2 years of dating, we decided to get married. Our wedding was a small affair, just close friends and family. After the wedding, I moved into James's family home. It was a big old house, and his mom, Margaret, lived with him. Margaret was bedridden, and James took care of her. I was new to this whole thing, but I wanted to help. "James, have you thought about maybe getting her into a care facility? They could give her the medical care she needs," I suggested, trying to be as gentle as possible. James looked uncomfortable. "I don't know. Mom has always wanted to stay here. She's comfortable at home." "Yeah, but she needs more than we can give her." "Think about it." "Okay." I pressed a bit, hoping he'd see reason. The next day, Linda, James's sister, came over. Linda was a piece of work. She was always on edge, always finding something to complain about. She had recently lost her husband, who was much older, and had left her a good amount of money. Linda and I had never really hit it off. "James, what's this I hear about putting Mom in a home?" Linda snapped as soon as she walked in. "I just mentioned it as an option," I said, trying to stay calm. "Well, it's not happening. Mom will stay here until the end," Linda said firmly, glaring at me. I decided it was best to drop the subject, especially with Linda being so against it. Besides, she was still mourning her husband, and I didn't want to add to her stress. But it was hard. Dealing with Linda wasn't easy. She had a knack for showing up unannounced and making everything more difficult. She never liked me and made it clear whenever she had the chance. One evening, I was in the kitchen cooking dinner. I was making a simple chicken dish with some vegetables, something easy but tasty. Linda walked in without knocking, as usual. "Janet, you're cooking again," she said, wrinkling her nose. "You know Mom liked her food with real flavor, not this bland stuff." "Good evening to you too, Linda," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm making what I can with what we have." "Well, it's not enough." "Maybe you should try a little harder," she snapped. I bit my tongue, not wanting to start a fight. James walked in at that moment, sensing the tension. "Hey, what's going on here?" he asked, looking between us. "James, your wife here thinks bland chicken is what Mom would want." I told her Mom liked her food with flavor. Linda huffed and walked out of the kitchen. James looked at me, clearly frustrated. "Janet, can't you just try to get along with her? She's been through a lot." "James, I'm doing my best, but she's always criticizing me. It's like nothing I do is ever good enough for her," I said, feeling the weight of it all. The next few days were tense. Linda continued to show up unannounced, and each time she found something new to complain about. It felt like I was walking on eggshells, never knowing what would set her off next. One evening, she came over and started criticizing the cleanliness of the house. "Janet, this place is a mess. Don't you ever clean?" she said, looking around with disdain. "I clean every day, Linda. Maybe if you actually helped, it wouldn't be so hard to keep up, I snapped, finally losing my patience. How dare you talk to me like that? I'm just trying to help, she yelled. Help by criticizing everything I do. That's not helping, Linda, I shot back, feeling the anger rising. Janet, calm down, James said, stepping between us. Calm down. She's constantly attacking me, and I'm supposed to just take it, I said, feeling the frustration boil over. Linda just glared at me and stormed out of the house. I felt a mix of relief and anger, the tension still thick in the air. Handling Linda was no picnic. She'd breeze in, spend a few minutes in her mother's room, and then leave, never really helping. I tried to avoid being home when Linda came around. It was easier that way. 6 months later, Margaret's health took a turn for the worse, and she passed away. It was a tough time for all of us, especially James. The funeral was a somber affair, but Linda's behavior made it even more stressful. At the graveside, Linda turned to me, her face twisted with anger. Janet, if you'd found the right medicine, Mom might still be here. I was stunned. Linda, I'm not a doctor. I did everything I could. Those are just excuses. She snapped back, not caring who she hurt. I felt a mix of anger and hurt. After the funeral, I told James he needed to talk to Linda and set things straight. James, you've got to talk to her. She can't keep blaming me for everything, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Janet, you're just making things worse. Stop provoking her, he said accusingly. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe he thought I was the problem. It was insulting and hurtful, especially after all I'd done to care for his mother. It had been a rough few months since Margaret passed away. I was still reeling from the accusations Linda threw at me during the funeral. I needed a distraction, so I decided to clean out Margaret's old room. Maybe it would help clear my mind. As I was sorting through her things, I found a stack of medical documents in her desk drawer. I started flipping through them, trying to make sense of it all. Something caught my eye. A report from 3 years ago showing Margaret was in excellent health, but recently she died of internal bleeding. That didn't add up. James came home from work looking tired. Hey, what are you up to? He asked, peeking into the room. I found some of your mom's medical papers, I said, holding up the documents. Look at this. 3 years ago she was fine, but then she dies of internal bleeding. James frowned, taking the papers from me. Yeah, that is strange. What are you thinking? I'm not sure yet, but it doesn't make sense, I said, feeling a knot in my stomach. Didn't Linda's husband die of the same thing? James nodded slowly. Yeah, he did. Internal bleeding, just like Mom. And both of them had unexplained bruises. Yeah, they did, James said, looking more concerned now. Why? What are you getting at? Bruises like that can happen if someone's taking blood thinners, but neither of them were on any. I asked, my mind racing. No, they weren't, James said, shaking his head. What are you saying, Janet? I don't know yet, but it's weird. Maybe I'm overthinking it, I said, trying to calm down. A few days later, I noticed some bruises on my arms and legs. I hadn't bumped into anything, and it didn't make sense. I decided to run a blood test at my lab just to be sure. When the results came back, I was stunned. My blood had a high level of warfarin, a powerful blood thinner. I knew I hadn't taken anything like that. James, we need to talk, I said, finding him in the living room. What is it now, Janet? He asked, sounding exasperated. I found warfarin in my blood. Someone's been poisoning me, I said, showing him the lab results. Who would do that? It doesn't make any sense. James said, shaking his head. I don't know, but I have a bad feeling about this. I think it's connected to what happened to your mom and Linda's husband, I said, feeling a chill run down my spine. Janet, you're starting to sound paranoid, James said, frowning. I'm not paranoid. This is real. We need to figure out who's behind this, I said, feeling desperate. As we were talking, Linda walked in unannounced, as usual. What's going on here? She asked, looking between us. Janet thinks someone's been poisoning her, James said, holding up the lab results. Poisoning? That's ridiculous. She works in a lab. Maybe she took something by accident, Linda said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I didn't take anything by accident, Linda. This is serious, I said, glaring at her. Oh, please. You're always looking for drama. Maybe you should focus on your own problems instead of dragging everyone else into them. Linda shot back, rolling her eyes. Linda, this isn't drama. This is my life we're talking about, I said, feeling my anger boil over. Calm down, James said, trying to step between us. We need to think this through. Calm down. Your sister's accusing me of making this up, and you want me to calm down. I yelled, feeling the frustration bubble up. Janet, you're acting crazy. We can't keep doing this. We need a divorce, James said, his voice flat and final. Divorce? Are you serious? You're going to believe her over me? I asked, feeling the shock hit me hard. Yes, Janet. You're always stirring things up. Can't take it anymore, he said, looking away. Linda smirked, clearly pleased with how things were turning out. I felt numb as I packed my things, the reality of what was happening sinking in. I couldn't believe this was how it was ending. Linda watched with a triumphant smile as I left the house, my heart heavy with betrayal and disbelief. After leaving James, I rented a small apartment near my work. It was hard to move on, but I was set on getting to the bottom of this mess. I went over all the facts, and it became clear. Linda was the one behind everything. She poisoned her husband, her mother, and tried to do the same to me. I hired a private detective, Alex, to dig deeper. I handed him all the information I had, including the results of my blood tests. Alex, I need you to find out everything about Linda. I'm sure she's behind this, I said, handing him the stack of papers. Got it to Janet. I'll start right away. Give me 2 weeks, he replied, nodding firmly. 2 weeks later, Alex called me. Janet, we need to meet. I've got some information. We met at a quiet cafe. Alex had a serious look on his face and a thick folder in his hand. All right, what did you find? I asked, feeling a knot in my stomach. Linda's in serious financial trouble. She blew through all the money from her husband, and now she's got huge debts, Alex explained, opening the folder. I looked through the documents, feeling a surge of anger. So she's been killing for money, first her husband, then her mother, and she tried to kill me. It looks that way. She's desperate and dangerous, Alex said, his voice steady. I decided to call James and set up a meeting. James, it's Janet. Can we talk? I said over the phone, my voice steady but firm. What is this about, Janet? He asked, sounding wary. It's important. It's about Linda, I replied, trying to keep my composure. All right, come over, he agreed, his voice filled with an incomprehensible warmth. I pulled up to James's house, my heart pounding. I had everything ready to confront him about Linda. As I walked in, James greeted me with a warm smile, which caught me off guard. Janet, glad you came. I was thinking, "Today's our anniversary," he said, holding a bottle of wine. "James, we need to talk." "It's serious," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let's hold off on that for a bit. Come on, let's have a drink." "It's our anniversary," he insisted, pouring 2 glasses of wine. I hesitated but then agreed. "All right, just for a bit. Then we need to talk." We clinked glasses, and I took a sip, trying to push my anxiety aside. But after a few minutes, I started feeling dizzy and nauseous. "James, I feel really sick. Where did you get this wine?" I asked, gripping the table for support. "Linda brought it from Italy. She said it's special. I've been drinking it for a while," he replied, looking concerned. "James, this wine is poisoned. Linda's trying to kill you for the inheritance. Call 911 now," I managed to say before collapsing to the floor, my vision blurring as I lay there barely conscious. I heard the door open and Linda's voice. "What's going on here?" she demanded, seeing me on the floor. "Janet says the wine's poisoned. She's really sick," James explained, panic in his voice. "Poisoned? She's drunk and making up lies to turn you against me," Linda snapped, her voice full of venom. "Linda, I'll get a cold compress," James said, rushing to the kitchen. Linda knelt beside me, her face twisted with a cruel smile. "It's over for you, Janet. In a few hours. You'll die of hemorrhage, then it'll be James's turn. And everything will be mine." I tried to speak, but my body wouldn't respond. The room spun around me, and I felt myself slipping away. The last thing I heard was James returning with the telltale sign of worry and confusion in his voice. Then everything went dark. I woke up in the hospital a few days later, my body aching and my mind foggy. The room was quiet except for the faint beeping of machines. I blinked a few times, trying to clear my vision, and saw a nurse bustling around the room. "Hey, you're awake," she said with a bright smile. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been run over," I muttered, my throat dry and scratchy. "What happened?" "You've been out for a few days. Your husband called the rescue service just in time, even though his sister tried her best to stop him," the nurse said, shaking her head. She was quite the piece of work, that one. James had called, even with Linda trying to stop him. "Yeah, he did. Good thing, too. The doctor said another hour, and it might have been too late," she added. Just then, the door opened, and Alex, the private detective, walked in with a police officer. Alex introduced him as Officer Martinez. "Janet, glad to see you're awake," Alex said, pulling up a chair next to my bed. "Alex, Officer Martinez, what's going on? What happened with Linda?" I asked, my voice still weak. "Janet, you did it. You helped us neutralize a dangerous criminal," Alex said, his voice firm but kind. "A criminal case has been opened against Linda," Officer Martinez added. "We exhumed the bodies of her ex-husband and her mother. The examination confirmed they were both poisoned with Warren, just like me," I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. "Yes, the same substance. It caused internal bleeding, leading to their slow deaths," Martinez explained, his tone serious. I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. I was lying there, crying with relief, listening to everything they were telling me. The nightmare was finally over. "Janet, you were incredibly brave to come forward with all this. You saved lives by exposing Linda," Alex said, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. As the nurse continued her checks, Alex and Officer Martinez discussed the next steps in Linda's case. I listened, feeling a sense of closure, but also a deep sadness about James. "Janet, if you need anything, don't hesitate to call," Martinez said as they prepared to leave. "Thank you, officer." "I appreciate everything you've done," I said, grateful for their support. As they left the room, I lay back on the pillows, staring at the ceiling. The relief of knowing Linda was caught was overwhelming, but the uncertainty about James left me feeling hollow. I knew it would take time to heal both physically and emotionally, but with Linda out of the picture, I had a chance to rebuild my life one step at a time. The day of the trial was nerve-wracking. I sat in the courtroom, my heart pounding, knowing I'd have to face Linda and tell the world what she had done. James was there too, but his face was a mask of doubt and confusion. He still didn't believe that his sister was guilty, even though the evidence showed she tried to poison him as well. As we waited for the trial to begin, James turned to me, his voice low and tense. "Janet, I can't believe Linda would do something like this. It feels like you're just out for revenge." His words cut deep. I couldn't understand his blind love for Linda, even with all the evidence against her. When the trial started, the prosecutor laid out the case, detailing Linda's actions and the evidence we had gathered. I was called to the stand as a witness, my hands shaking as I took my seat. "Janet, can you tell us about your suspicions and the evidence you found?" the prosecutor asked, his voice calm and steady. I took a deep breath and began. I started noticing strange symptoms after moving in with James. His mother's health declined rapidly, and she had unexplained bruises. I found similar symptoms in myself later on. "What did you find in your investigation?" he prompted. I hired a private detective who discovered that Linda was in severe financial trouble. We found evidence that she had poisoned her husband and was likely trying to do the same to me and James for financial gain, I explained, my voice trembling. "Did Linda ever say anything to you that indicated her guilt?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes, just before I lost consciousness, she told me it was over for me, and that after I died, James would be next. She wanted everything we had," I said, my voice breaking with emotion. The defense lawyer stood up to cross-examine me, trying to cast doubt on my testimony. "Janet, isn't it true that you and Linda never got along? Couldn't this be a personal vendetta?" "No, this isn't personal. This is about stopping a killer," I said firmly, refusing to be intimidated. As the trial went on, more witnesses testified, and the evidence piled up against Linda. The private detective presented his findings, and the medical examiner confirmed the presence of werin in the exhumed bodies. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. When Linda was called to the stand, she initially denied everything, but the weight of the evidence was too much. Under pressure, she finally broke down and confessed. In the next court hearing, Linda looked at James with a mocking smile. "Yes, I did it. I poisoned my husband, our mother, and I tried to poison you and Janet. I'd wanted it all, the money, the property. And look at you now, crying like a baby." James's face crumpled, tears streaming down his cheeks as he heard her words. "Linda, how could you?" he asked. She laughed, a cold, cynical sound that sent chills down my spine. "You were always so gullible, James. You never saw what was right in front of you." The judge's gavel banged, calling for order in the court. Linda was convicted of double premeditated murder and the attempted murder of me and James. She was sentenced to a long prison term, her mocking smile fading as she was led away in handcuffs. After the trial, I made the hard decision to divorce James. There was just too much pain and betrayal to mend. I went through treatment to recover from the poisoning, and I heard through friends that James was also undergoing treatment because Linda had tried to poison him too. I was in my new apartment, trying to rebuild my life. It was small but cozy, a fresh start away from all the chaos. I focused on getting healthy and finding some peace. One afternoon, I was having coffee with my friend Sarah, who had been my rock through all of this. "So how are you really doing, Janet?" Sarah asked, looking at me with concern. "I'm getting there, one day at a time. It's been rough, but I'm trying to move on," I replied, sipping my coffee. "Have you heard from James?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah, he's tried a few times to patch things up," I said, rolling my eyes. "But I told him it's over. Good for you. After everything he put you through, you deserve better," she said, nodding in approval. "I just can't forget how he trusted Linda over me time and time again." "Trust is everything in a marriage, and once it's gone, there's no going back," I said, feeling a pang of sadness. "You're right. You need someone who believes in you and stands by you no matter what," Sarah said, squeezing my hand. One day, I was sorting through some old photos, trying to decide what to keep and what to toss. Each picture brought back memories, some good, some painful. My phone buzzed with a message from James. I hesitated, but then opened it. "Janet, I know I've hurt you deeply. Can we please talk one last time?" The message read. I took a deep breath and replied, "James, there's nothing left to say. We both need to move on. I wish you well, but this chapter is closed." I hit send and felt a strange mix of relief and finality. It was time to close the door on that part of my life for good. In the evenings, I took up painting as a way to relax and express myself. It was therapeutic, a way to channel my emotions into something positive. I also joined a local book club, meeting new people and slowly building a new circle of friends. Every day was a step towards healing, and I was determined to build a life filled with trust, joy, and peace. The past would always be a part of me, but it didn't define my future. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, stronger and wiser than before.